Good evening and welcome to our service. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming and entering in silence and waiting in silence. I know often for our gatherings, it's a time to see each other. And certainly that is one of the great joys of our congregation, is the fellowship that we have when we gather. For this one night, though, we gather in quietness. We will worship in quietness. And then when the service is over, I invite you to leave in that same quietness. We come this evening on Good Friday, and we will have a Tenebrae service, which is a service of shadows. The format of the service is that there will be readings through our time. And at the end of each one of those readings, I will extinguish one of the candles that is here on the platform with me. As we work through the service, all of the smaller candles will be extinguished. During that time, we'll also have the singing of hymns. As you might notice, there is one larger candle in the back. And you may recognize that as one of the candles that we use during the season of Advent. That is the candle that is at the center. It is the Christ candle. And it too is lit this evening. But unlike the others, the Christ candle will not be extinguished. It will continue to burn. It is a reminder for us as we go through this evening and we read the story of Jesus' death on a cross, that though his life is extinguished, even in death there is hope. The perfect one would not be permanently corralled by the grave. There is a resurrection coming. As we come this evening, I invite you to worship in a way that fits for you. It might be that just listening to the readings is most helpful. And as we come to the hymns, seeing the words on the screen and following along also might be most helpful. I recognize sometimes looking through books and looking through the Bible can at moments be a distraction. As we remember the words here that I'll be reading, they were intended always to be heard. As they were written to be passed on orally, not in a written form. So as you hear and listen, know that you are receiving those words as they were intended. And as we go through this time together, we will hear of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. And our time here is not to make you sad. That is not the intent. And certainly as we see that story, there are horrors to it. But as we encounter that story this evening, I want us to be present. I want us to feel ourselves in that story. Think of yourself as an observer. Think of yourself as you were watching this happen. So this evening as we come, I invite you to be present. And part of being present is being at the crucifixion of Jesus. Jesus had many of his closest followers with him through the course of the Gospels. For years they were together. But then on this last night, as he was arrested, all of those followers, save one, disappeared. And there at the cross of Jesus, we find a number of women who had not before played a significant role in the Gospels. But they were present for Jesus. In his moment of anguish, in his moment where he could not help others, they were there to be present for him. And so as we come this evening, I invite us to be like the women at the cross who did not abandon Jesus in this oh so dire moment. And even as we think of those women, I expect they felt helpless, because indeed they were. There was nothing they could do. They could not change the course of events, and certainly the outcome was predetermined. But they could be with Jesus in his suffering. And so as we come to this reading this evening, I invite you to be present. And I invite you to be present in the suffering of Jesus. First, we come to the shadow of betrayal. I am reading from Matthew 26, beginning in verse 20. When evening came, Jesus was reclining at the table with the 12. And while they were there eating, he said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me." They were very sad and began to say to him one after the other, "Surely you don't mean me, Lord." Jesus replied, "The one who has dipped his hand into the bowl with me will betray me. The Son of Man will go just as it is written about him. But woe to the man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better for him if he had not been born." Then Judas, the one who would betray him, said, "Surely you don't mean me, Rabbi." Jesus answered, "You have said so." We think of Jesus with his closest disciples, there on that night, knowing that one would be the betrayer. One who had heard the things that Jesus had taught. One who had seen the miracles that Jesus had done. When the 5,000 were fed, he saw that. When Jesus healed and restored sight, he was there. When Jesus walked on the water, to the amazement of it all, he saw that too. But yet, he would betray Jesus, his friend, and what should have been his Lord. Have you ever been betrayed by a friend? It hurts. It certainly did not hurt any less for Jesus than to know that the one that he called friend would be the same that would turn him over to the authorities, would be the same that would begin the action that would lead to him being put to death. I'll extinguish now the first candle. We come now to the shadow of agony. This will continue reading in Matthew chapter 26, beginning in verse 26. While they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat, this is my body." Then he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which has been poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink from this fruit of the vine from now until the day when I drink it new with you in the Father's kingdom." When they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Jesus told them, "This very night you will all fall away on account of me, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I have risen, I will go ahead of you into Galilee." Peter replied, "Even if all fall away on account of you, I never will." "Truly, I tell you," Jesus answered, "this very night before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times." Peter declared, "Even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you." And all the other disciples said the same. Then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to them, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee along with him and began to be sorrowful and troubled. And he said to them, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." Going a little farther, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. "Couldn't you men keep watch with me for 1 hour?" he asked Peter. "Watch and pray that so you will not fall in temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." He went away a second time and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, for this cup to be taken away unless I drink it, may your will be done." When he came back, he again found them sleeping because their eyes were heavy. So he left them and went away once more and prayed the 3rd time, saying the same thing. Then he returned to his disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Look, the hour has come, and the Son of Man is being delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let's go. Here comes my betrayer." Jesus, on what most certainly is the worst night of his life, goes and pleads his case before God. "Please take this cup away. If there is another way, Father in heaven, make it so." And he ends each time after submitting his request to the Father in heaven, saying, "Not my will, but yours be done. God, though I wish not to go forward, if it is your will, let it be." There he is in great agony, praying before God, even to the point of death, as the scriptures proclaim. Wouldn't this be the moment that a friend would be helpful? Wouldn't this be the moment that one of those disciples who declared their allegiance oh so recently ago might at least be able to stay awake? And perhaps if they stayed awake, then they might be able to join him in prayer. But they could not. Their eyes were heavy. The hour was late. And they fell asleep. On the night that Jesus needed them the most, his closest friends were asleep. And when he pleaded for their help, their eyes were heavy, and they fell asleep again. I'll now extinguish the second candle. We'll now sing together, "Grace Greater Than Our Sin." We come now to the third shadow, the shadow of arrest, beginning in verse 47. While he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived, and with him a large crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests and elders of the people. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with him. "The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him." Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus replied, "Do what you came for, friend." Then the men stepped forward, seized Jesus, and arrested him. Jesus spent most of his ministry in Galilee, some distance from where he is now, here in Jerusalem. The people do not know who he is. They've heard his name for sure, but they would not recognize him. And so, as these soldiers come to surround Jesus and his small group of disciples, they want to know exactly who they need to take. You can imagine their concern that once the group sees the soldiers, they might begin to flee, and then they wouldn't know who to grab. So they send the betrayer in first. Judas walks to Jesus and delivers the pre-arranged sign, a friendly kiss upon his cheek. The kiss you make to someone who you care about. The kiss you make to someone who has seen life with you. A loved one, a friend, someone with whom your heart is connected. Judas delivers the kiss, and the soldiers come surrounding Jesus, grabbing at him. Jesus, overwhelmed by their presence, is taken away. We come now to the shadow of accusation. I'll read to us from Matthew chapter 27, beginning in verse 11. Meanwhile, Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "You have said so," Jesus replied. When he was accused by the chief priests and the elders, he gave no answer. And Pilate asked him, "Don't you hear the testimony they are bringing against you?" But Jesus made no reply, not even to a single charge, to the great amazement of the governor. Jesus on this night moves from place to place and from authority to authority, as his charges are brought and then moved to another accuser in another venue. Here he finds himself before Pilate and receives the question, "Are you the king of the Jews?" The answer is yes, of course. Jesus is king of what we might call an upside-down kingdom. A kingdom where rulers don't use their power over people, but rather people use their strength to serve and love others. A kingdom that is not about seeing how high, how wealthy, how powerful you can become, but a kingdom that is marked by a love for those who cannot return it, and giving kindness to others who would hardly be worth it. Yes, Jesus is a king but a king to an upside-down kingdom. I don't think Pilate or the religious leaders are going to understand that, at least not on this evening. And as Jesus is brought there and the accusations are brought before him, we find here, as it's recorded in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus said nothing. With his life on the line, surely he would defend himself. He would say it's not true. He'd say he's been misunderstood. But no, our Lord said nothing. In silence, he received their accusations, much to the shock of Pontius Pilate. We will sing now, "We Are the Reason." We come now to the fifth shadow, the shadow of rejection. I am beginning in verse 20. But the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus executed. "Which of the two do you want me to release to you?" asked the governor. "Barabbas," they answered. "What shall I do then with Jesus, who is called Messiah?" Pilate asked him. They all answered, "Crucify him." "Why? What crime has he committed?" asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, "Crucify him!" When Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, but that instead an uproar was starting, he took water and washed his hands in front of the crowd. "I am innocent of this man's blood," he said. "It is your responsibility." All the people answered, "His blood is on us and on our children." Then he released Barabbas to them, but he had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. Then the governor's soldiers took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole company of soldiers around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and then they twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head. They put a staff in his right hand. Then they knelt in front of him and mocked him. "Hail, King of the Jews," they said. They spit on him, took the staff and struck him on the head again and again. After they had mocked him, they took off the robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. Jesus is utterly rejected. The religious leaders and the people are given an option to save Jesus from crucifixion. Yet they say, "No, let us save Barabbas, a terrorist, someone who had earned his place on the cross." And to Jesus, they said, crucify him. Louder and louder they shouted, their voices raising with each scream. Pilate worries that a riot might ensue and gives in to their demand and allows the prisoner Barabbas to go free, while the innocent Jesus will be crucified. And then he's brought before the soldiers. The crown of thorns is placed upon his head. And they mock him further by putting a purple robe, a color fitting a king. And there they ridicule him relentlessly. With their words they cut, but the crown cuts his flesh. We know Jesus lived without sin. I invited you to be present in the story. Can you imagine being in that moment? Can you imagine the soldiers gathered around, ridiculing you with such ferocity? And in the midst of that, you hold no anger. You do not strike back. You only receive. You somehow receive their hurt, but do not give any back. I don't know how that is possible. But Jesus, the sinless one, did not respond with sin. We come now to the sixth shadow, the shadow of crucifixion. I'll continue reading in verse 32. As they were going out, they met a man from Cyrene named Simon, and they forced him to carry the cross. They came to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. There they offered Jesus wine to drink mixed with gall, but tasting it, he refused to drink it. When they had crucified him, they divided up his clothes by casting lots. And sitting down, they kept watch over him. Above his head, there was written this charge against him: "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." Let us pause as we consider the sight of Jesus there on the cross. The nails have put in. His body has been beaten. It's probably almost unrecognizable. He's been stripped of his clothes. Blood flows freely. The purple that they put upon him in a robe now adorns his body as bruises from the harm that has been inflicted. And there, in a moment of utter humiliation, he is lifted up before the crowd to see, serving as an example to them of what might happen. And there the placard reads, "Jesus, the King of the Jews." The placard is right. Nevertheless, death is coming. There is only one way to get off the cross, and that is by being dead. We will now sing, O Sacred Head, Now Wounded. We come now to the seventh shadow, the shadow of derision. I will continue reading from verse 38. 2 rebels were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. Come down from the cross if you are the Son of God." In the same way, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders mocked him. "He saved others," they said, "but he can't save himself. He's the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross, and we'll believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God rescue him now if he wants him. For he said, 'I am the Son of God.'" In the same way, the rebels who were crucified with him also heaped insults on him. We see the people watching Jesus crucified could not resist the opportunity to finally deliver their verbal blows. The religious leaders had tried to outwit him, and that had not gone well. Jesus, the wise teacher from God, always turned back their arguments. But now they will deliver their blows, now that he is helpless upon the cross. And as we think of the invitation to be present in this story, ask you now, if you had been there, what would you have done? What would you have said? We hear the hurt that others delivered, but we do know there were women particularly, friends of Jesus. Perhaps their words were kind. Perhaps their presence was comforting. But in this moment, let us not forget the words and insults delivered even by those who were crucified along with him. Even those who hung upon a cross with their lives ebbing away still found enough energy to say something unpleasant to a dying Jesus. We come now to the eighth shadow, the shadow of death. Continuing from verse 45. 5. From noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over all the land. About 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? When some of those who were standing there heard this, they said, he's calling Elijah. Immediately one of them ran and got a sponge. He filled it with the wine vinegar, put it on a staff, and offered it to Jesus to drink. The rest said, now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to save him. And when Jesus cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, the rock split, and tombs broke open. The bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tombs after Jesus' resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared to many people. When the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that happened, they were terrified and exclaimed, surely he was the Son of God. Even in death, the identity of Jesus breaks through. We can see it is almost as if the physical world is in anger at the death of God's own Son. The sun does not shine, the ground quakes. And in the midst of that horror, the identity of Jesus is known by those who did not know him otherwise. And as we think of Jesus' final moments, he says the haunting words, my God, why have you forsaken me? As we think of the physical toll of the cross, it is certainly significant, but it is probably not that much more than any criminal placed upon a cross. What sets Jesus' death apart in its anguish is that moment when Jesus looks out to God the Father and he is not there. Jesus, who has been one with God the Father from all time before. Jesus, as we have followed him through the Gospels, when things got challenging, when he got weary, where do we find him? Praying to God the Father. And even on this night, as he is there in the garden pleading his case, to whom is he pleading? God the Father. But then there upon the cross, Jesus goes to cry out to his Father, but is met with silence. My God, why have you forsaken me? We'll now sing When I Survey the Wondrous Cross. We come now to the ninth and final shadow, the shadow of burial. I'll be reading from Matthew 27, verse 57. As evening approached, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who had himself become a disciple of Jesus. Going to Pilate, he asked for Jesus' body, and Pilate ordered that it be given to him. Joseph took the body, wrapped it in clean linen cloth, and placed it in his own new tomb that he had cut out of the rock. He rolled a big stone in front of the entrance to the tomb and went away. Thus ends Jesus' Friday night. It has been a long day, beginning in the early morning hours. He has gone through the arrest, the accusations, is finally put upon the cross and dies. And as he dies, we find a compassionate soul who says to Pilate, I'm with Jesus. Let me take his body. And we see as Joseph Arimathea takes the body of Jesus, he cares for it and puts it in his own new tomb. Joseph of Arimathea is a friend to the dead Jesus. Does he know that Sunday is coming? It doesn't seem that anyone did. But he says, Jesus, I am with you in this moment. I am present with you now, here in your death. Even at this moment that seems hopeless, even at this moment that certainly seems to have been against God's grand design and grand will, although it was not. In that hopeless moment, he still chooses Jesus. As we think of the story and the horror of it, we do find his redeeming act to close upon. We'll have our final song, Jesus Paid It All. And then following that, Pastor Miranda will come forward and offer us words of dismissal.